Azerbaijan and Armenia have agreed to a new ceasefire beginning at midnight Sunday, local time. The agreement comes hours after shelling killed 13 people and wounded more than 50 others on Saturday. It happened in the Azerbaijani city of Ganja. So far, neither side is claiming responsibility for the attack. The two countries sit between Russia, Turkey, and Iran and are fighting over control of a mountain territory recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but populated and governed by ethnic Armenians. Joining us to talk more about this is the editor-in-chief of Aliq Media, Arsen Kharatyan. Well, thank you very much for joining us. What is at the heart of this conflict? Can you give us some historical context?
Thanks for having me, and thank you for your interest. Well, this is a conflict that has been ongoing since the Soviets collapsed. At least the military phase has been from 1991 to 1993, the deadliest conflict in the former Soviet space, which caused over 30,000 lives and has been one of the most militarized zones in the world to this day. We have trenches from World War I times. I mean, we have snipers shooting at each other for years. And at this point, we have pretty much the largest military escalation since the early 90s, which is actually becoming more and more dangerous. We have forbidden cluster bombs being used against civilians by Azerbaijan, by the way. Of course, we have quite a serious situation, almost to the degree of humanitarian. It is a humanitarian crisis, but a catastrophe that can come around if the bigger players don't get involved. So the history behind this is pretty much the Soviet era dealing between Russia and Turkey, where Joseph Stalin basically gave the territory to Azerbaijan. The cost of it was to have Azerbaijan being part of the Soviet Union, and it was a dealing between Turkey and Russia. 100 years after a treaty, the Kars Treaty, we are at the verge of another humanitarian catastrophe where the bigger players are trying to make South Caucasus another terrorist zone, like in Syria and Libya. And that is something we Armenians definitely don't want. You here in America do know and have heard a lot about the Armenian genocide 100 years ago. A very large part of this country's population, Armenian communities, are here because of that genocide, and we're seeing a deja vu, another genocide being committed against Armenians by Azerbaijan and by Turkey.
Well, I appreciate you giving us that historical context, because I think for many Americans, we're hearing about this conflict and don't really understand what's going on. And in particular, I want to ask you a little bit more about some of the regional players, because as you mentioned, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Russia, Iran, Turkey, and Georgia are all involved. Can you tell us in what ways they're perhaps pursuing some of their own geopolitical objectives?
Sure, and it's very important to understand in order for us to have a clearer picture of the larger context. And I think what we're seeing now is somebody like the Sultan of Turkey, Erdogan, trying to basically bring up or recreate his Ottoman interests. He has aspirations of creating another Ottoman state, and Armenians in general are again the biggest problem for them. So they are going for a complete elimination of a nation as we speak here. And I believe that the U.S. administration and the political environment here should address this issue. I was seeing your entry to the program, and you're exactly right that this is one of the biggest challenges for the U.S. administration. Russia, being a partner with Armenia, having a military union with us called CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization, so far hasn't done much about it. I mean, it's keeping its neutrality. On Monday, we have UN Security Council meeting on Karabakh issue, and I hope that they will address the issue, the humanitarian crisis, and the cluster bombs that are being used by Azerbaijanis to kill our children. We have over 30 civilians being killed by internationally forbidden weapons. And we're seeing this, and the whole world is basically watching the process. What Turkey is doing with Azerbaijan is bringing Syrian mercenaries that they have been training there to fight against Armenians. We are also hearing Pakistanis coming to fight against Armenians. And I hope that India will come up with something. I'm hearing that the Secretary of State has a visit to New Delhi, and I hope that they will touch upon this issue with Prime Minister Modi. But what we're seeing is that Turkey is creating another terrorist hub in South Caucasus, and it seems like the larger players, both in the region and in the world, are watching as that is happening. The French president has announced, actually openly spoken, that they have intelligence about terrorists being transported already. The Russian Foreign Ministry has come up with a statement. Unfortunately, we haven't heard much from Washington, and I hope that, and I'm sure that the U.S. intelligence does have information about this, and that will come up soon, hopefully also.
Well, as you're talking about Russia, I want to make sure that our viewers know that the truce that Russia laid out last week almost immediately fell apart. I'm wondering if you can tell us, what does that say about hopes for peace, and what are the next steps towards that, if any?
Well, unfortunately, you're exactly right. On October 10th, Russia tried to broker a truce, a humanitarian truce, so that we can at least exchange prisoners and the bodies of the dead. Azerbaijan is obviously did not want that, because as soon as that truce is in place, we will be able to collect the bodies of the terrorists that are fighting against us from Syria, and that's the biggest fear that they have. They also want to cover up the war crimes that they have been committing during the last couple of days, or 3 weeks for now, by now. So what Azerbaijan right now and Turkey want is continuous war and basically elimination of a nation as we speak. Armenia has been very openly suggesting that they're ready to go back to the negotiations, peaceful negotiations, a context of the OSCE Minsk Group, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, where Russia, United States, and France are the co-chair countries. We want to go back to those negotiations. We want to stop this bloodshed, while Azerbaijan and Turkey are continuing their attacks, and we're not able to actually stop this. And I hope that much sooner the U.S. administration will address this more seriously. We Armenian Americans here were able to make the Karabakh issue as part of the internal political discussion here, as we're nearing the elections of November 3rd. Joe Biden came up with a statement just 3 days ago, making very clear about what the U.S. or the White House should do. Secretary Pompeo had to address the issue afterwards and gave an interview and openly said that we know that Armenians are basically struggling against Azerbaijan and Turkey. So what is going to be the U.S. moves are not clear, and I think that as close as elections are here in the U.S., the candidates are going to actually have to make up their minds on what their stance is on Nagorno-Karabakh if they want to win the Armenian vote. And the Armenian vote is not that little. We have 1.5 million Armenians living here. Some of them are in swing states, very well organized. We have Michigan, we have Florida, we have Nevada, we have Rhode Island, we have several other states, including Vermont, actually, where this could be a serious issue. So what we believe is that unless we actually have somebody from Washington getting involved seriously and stopping this bloodshed, I think the political environment here, at least when it comes to the Armenian vote, is not going to change.
All right, a very complicated situation over there, and our hopes obviously for all the people facing those civilian casualties that this conflict can be resolved. Thank you for sharing your perspective as an Armenian American, Arsen.
Thank you very much for having me.